Star Trek, the biggest movie and TV franchise of all time. But how did one show become so successful?
It inspired people to believe in themselves and reach beyond their perceived limitations.
The best of what we did was done in the hopes of illuminating mankind's potential.
Now, former cast members and producers reveal the truth behind Star Trek. From creator Gene Roddenberry's original ideas.
We're all one people on one planet.
Roddenberry had a piece of paper. A piece of paper. Most guys came in with a book almost.
The characters that never made it on screen.
He had a character who was the devil. And I said, you know, that's very inventive. It's terrible because television will not accept that.
If they're going to get rid of the pointed ears, the next thing is going to get rid of me.
And the real science that gave Star Trek the edge over other sci-fi shows.
The use of antimatter as a propulsive source of energy in Star Trek is exactly right.
What we did in science fiction had some connection to potential reality.
We discover how Star Trek's glamorous multiracial crew made television history.
There was a lot of fuss about it. When a black person came on as a star of a TV show, it was a big deal.
The birth of the Trekkie fan base.
Here was a show that they were going to cancel. No.
And we investigate Star Trek's legacy, how it turned science fiction into science fact.
I was a big Star Trek fan. You would see all these technologies that were totally science fiction, which of course today are reality.
This is the real story behind Star Trek. Larger-than-life characters, idealistic politics, and the one man who started it all. Star Trek: The Motion Picture premiered on December 6, 1979, and raked in a massive $139 million at the box office.
Secure all stations. Clear the bridge.
4 years in the making, Star Trek the movie brought back William Shatner as Captain Kirk and Leonard Nimoy as Mr. Spock. It was what the world and Trekkies everywhere had been waiting for.
You will be assimilated.
But the motion picture was just the start. 3 decades on, Star Trek has become a multi-billion-dollar franchise and a household name. The real story behind Star Trek began almost 30 years before the movie hit the silver screen, with sci-fi fan Gene Roddenberry. A former World War II pilot, by the early 50s, Roddenberry had become an LA cop. After a long police shift, his favorite way to relax was in front of the TV.
My father really enjoyed the repetitiveness of television based on what he had seen on TV through the westerns and the cop shows. And that each week you get to connect with an audience.
TV had only just begun to take off, and Roddenberry saw it as a way to make his mark on the world. Using his day job as inspiration, by night he started writing scripts for new cop shows such as Mr. District Attorney and Highway Patrol.
He was trying to make a living. He was trying to work in the industry to make a living and managed to write a couple of scripts.
By 1956, Roddenberry's script writing was earning him 4 times his cop salary. So he quit the force and began writing full-time for the weekly western Have Gun, Will Travel. 7 years later, he was finally producing his own show, The Lieutenant, a series based on the U.S. Marines. But Roddenberry's passion was science fiction. By the end of 1963, he'd come up with a futuristic new idea he had high hopes for.
My father started off as a bomber pilot in World War II and flew 70 or 80 missions in the South Pacific. He fought and killed people and saw his friends die. I mean, he saw the ugliest we could possibly be. That's what forced him to think about our future.
3, 2, 1.
In the early 1960s, the space race was well underway and influencing popular culture on every level. Space wasn't a new topic for films and TV, but Roddenberry's idea was. In the 23rd century, a united Earth sends a peacekeeping spaceship to seek out new life forms and civilizations across the universe. He called it Star Trek.
My father did have this beautiful vision of the future, but he had to figure out how to get it out there.
Roddenberry approached several major studios, but his big break came in 1964 with a meeting with producer Herb Solow, the man behind hit show Mission Impossible.
Roddenberry had a piece of paper. A piece of paper. People have to understand. Most guys came in with a book almost. Here's a rundown of all our characters and their description and their background, their relationship to each other. And he started to stumble through talking about the idea.
Roddenberry's initial pitch bore little resemblance to the final product. His starship was called the SS Yorktown, commanded by naval officer Captain April. Second in command was a woman called Number One, while the ship's lieutenant was a very early version of Mr. Spock, a fearful-looking half-Martian with a satanic appearance.
He had a character who was the devil. Devil had pointed ears and arched eyebrows and had a tail with a pointer at the end of it. And I said, that's very inventive. It's terrible because television will not accept that.
People in what was known as the Bible Belt, the southern states, the United States, religious people might see this character as devilish and would not want that devilish character on their TV sets.
Despite Spock's outlandish looks and Roddenberry's stumbling presentation, Solow saw potential in the idea.
I said, I like this, what you're talking about. So it must be good because you sure as hell can't sell it. You're not a good salesman.
A few days later, Solow arranged a meeting to pitch the series to former colleagues at NBC.
Today, a pitch is a whole big deal. You practice for the pitch. There are books you could buy on the... There's nothing like that. It was simply you go in there and you say, we have an idea for a television series, right? And if in the first few minutes they don't like it, they say, thank you very much, Herb. Come again, call us, we'll have lunch, whatever. Gene started to speak badly, and I cut him off because I could see the looks on their faces. I went ahead and pitched the idea. It's adventure, it's detective, it's war, it's this, it's that. It happens to be in outer space. When we finished discussing, they looked at me and they said, we don't think that's for us.
But Solow was ready to put his reputation as a first-class producer on the line. He stood his ground and appealed to his former colleagues to give Star Trek a break.
I wasn't going to take no for an answer. These are my friends. I mean, they at least could give me a script commitment, right? Let us write the script to prove to you guys it's something different, guys. It's different. They went ahead and agreed to a script, which was great, a script. That's all we needed was the script.
See you soon. Solow and Roddenberry immediately started work on a script. Several months later, NBC agreed to commission an hour-long Star Trek pilot. The SS Yorktown had become the Enterprise, and rising star Jeffrey Hunter signed up to play the lead, now called Captain Pike. His sidekick, Mr. Spock, had been transformed into a Vulcan science officer, and relatively unknown actor Leonard Nimoy was called in to try out for the role.
I went to the meeting expecting that I would be asked to read for the role or be auditioned in some way. But I realized he was really selling me on the idea of doing this character. This is more than a one- or two-dimensional character. There's a character with some complexities.
Captain, it will be very gratifying to leave here.
Promoted to producer for the pilot, Roddenberry was determined to stamp his mark on every level of production.
This was a gentleman who didn't like to be called the producer of Star Trek. He wanted to be called the creator. The creator of Star Trek.
Gene would tell everyone that he created the whole look of Star Trek. I'll tell you right now, That's abject untruth. The look of Star Trek came from a very talented draftsman and artist named Matt Jeffries.
Unimpressed with the efforts of previous sci-fi shows like Flash Gordon, Roddenberry's brief for the Enterprise was it had to look capable of carrying a 200-strong crew across the galaxy.
Matt started to design different looks to the Enterprise. And we finally agreed on one. And Matt said, fine, before we show it to Roddenberry, I'm going to make a big color version of the one we like. He said that always works with producers who are unsure of themselves. And of course, when Gene walked in, his eye went right to the color one. That's how the Enterprise was born.
While the iconic shape of the USS Enterprise was pure Hollywood fantasy, Roddenberry insisted Star Trek's futuristic technology, from communication systems to traveling in space, had to be scientifically plausible.
I think a lot of it was believable. The science in Star Trek could evolve into reality in the future, and a lot of it did. A lot of it did. We had the first what we call communicators. They're cell phones. It's ubiquitous. Everybody has one. Everybody has one. And the first ones had that flip-open cover, just like what we had on the show.
Drop by my cabin, Doctor.
What we did in science fiction had some connection to the potential reality.
Almost half a century after Roddenberry's first pilot, how does Star Trek's on-screen science stand the test of time?
I couldn't believe what Custom T-shirts did for this team. Before Custom Ink, we're just a bunch of coworkers goofing around. Now we're a true team, going out to win.
I'd never designed a t-shirt before, so I was kind of nervous. But when I showed up with the box and my friends pulled the t-shirts out, everyone was so excited. It was amazing. Thanks, Custom Ink.
Custom Ink t-shirts have this incredible power to bring people together. We're helping people create the right shirts they'll love for their groups or occasions. And they can do it online, anytime, with Custom Ink.
We bring all kinds of people together. Families, teams, reunions, church groups, cheerleaders, companies big and small. And we're proud to say that we've helped create over 30 million custom t-shirts.
Our website is super easy. Just choose a style from the hundreds available, then pick a color that's perfect and start designing. The Custom Ink Design Lab has tons of fonts and amazing artwork. So now it's easier than ever to make custom t-shirts.
Even this guy can do it. As soon as a customer starts their design, an inker like me is there to help them make it perfect.
We care about every customer's design just as much as they do.
Thanks, Custom Ink!
The inkers I worked with are amazing.
I'm ready when you are.
I uploaded my own art and they helped me with my design until it was absolutely perfect. Our shirts are awesome and the girls are so happy.
Thanks, Custom Ink!
Custom Ink really helped my business look professional. When my crew wears the shirts, our clients know we're for real. Thanks, Custom Ink.
We know the shirts mean a lot, and we're just nuts about living up to that. Good isn't good enough. We want people thinking, wow, that was awesome. And that's why 99% of customers say they'd come back to Custom Ink.
I would definitely use Custom Ink again, and we've recommended it to friends. And it's not just for t-shirts. You can even order can coolers and hats. I can honestly say Custom Ink was the best online experience I've ever had.
Visit trycustomink.com today and start your t-shirt design for free. Order one shirt or thousands. On-time delivery is guaranteed and we'll even ship your order absolutely free.
This was the best reunion ever.
Thanks, Custom Ink!
Thanks, Custom Ink!
Thanks, Custom Ink!
This summer, adjust your latitude. The Epic Aerial Series returns, taking you to all new places and breathtaking new heights. Aerial America, an all-new season, premieres Sunday, July 14th at 9.
By 1965, man hadn't yet reached the moon, and other planets were still a pipe dream. But Star Trek creator Gene Roddenberry wanted his fictional starship, the USS Enterprise, to travel the universe effortlessly and, more importantly, believably. Traveling at the speed of light, more than 186,000 miles per second, it would still take 5 years to reach our closest star, Alpha Centauri. Roddenberry, looking for a way the Enterprise could cover these incredible distances, found the answer in the theories of the most celebrated physicist of all time.
In his general theory of relativity, Albert Einstein showed that space and time are intimately connected. and that you can think of space-time as a kind of fabric that stretches and bends. If we actually compressed space in some fashion, we can reduce the distance between our starship and the place it wants to go by a tremendous amount.
So while it is theoretically possible to warp space, one huge problem stands in the way of making it a reality.
It would take a tremendous amount of energy to warp space in such a way that it would provide a means of propulsion for a starship. So in Star Trek, we have this hypothetical warp drive, and it works in a very specific way. Matter and antimatter are collided together, which produces a tremendous amount of energy.
When Roddenberry first devised the antimatter warp drive as a way to travel to the stars, physicists knew antimatter existed, but they hadn't been able to isolate it. 5 decades later, one of the world's most expensive physics experiments here at CERN in Switzerland has finally made the science behind Star Trek's warp drive a reality. Physicist Jeffrey Hangst now works with antimatter on a daily basis.
I'm sure that for many people, the first time they ever heard about antimatter was watching Star Trek, and that captured their imagination. What is this? What's it about? This mysterious stuff, whatever it is that powers starships. People come here and take tours, and then they're astounded to find out that this is actually real. A lot of people still don't think that antimatter is real. The use of antimatter as a propulsive source of energy in Star Trek is exactly right. In principle, if you knew how to harness that, it's the most weight-efficient rocket fuel you can imagine.
Thanks to scientists like Hangst and his team, it has been proven beyond doubt that when matter meets antimatter, they annihilate each other, releasing a huge amount of energy in the process. But containing it safely is a problem. Just 1 pound of antimatter can release the equivalent power to that of a hydrogen bomb. So for now, the team here at CERN must stick to working with very small amounts.
So what we have here is an actual trap, a device for catching and holding antimatter. The antimatter comes from the antiproton decelerator. We slow it, stop it, and contain it inside of this green magnet to hold the antimatter away from all the matter. And in fact, right now, we're storing a bunch of antiprotons in here to see how long they survive.
While Hangst has worked out how to store antimatter, harnessing this technology to propel a spacecraft is a different question altogether.
Say I have some antimatter and I'm going to use it in my spaceship to react with matter to create energy. How do I actually engineer that into something that produces thrust? Okay, I don't know how to do that. That's the beauty of science fiction. You don't have to go into the details. But I can promise you it's much more complicated than you can imagine.
Even if scientists did come up with a safe source of fuel for a warp drive engine, it would be a struggle to produce the amount of antimatter needed.
We're dealing with single atoms. Say a gram of antihydrogen will get you a few liftoffs, perhaps. But it would take something like 100 billion years, right? That's longer than the known age of the universe to accumulate that type of antimatter with the technology that we have today. It's just insurmountably difficult.
So while Star Trek propulsion still remains a theory, how soon will it be before we can reach the furthest reaches of the galaxy, like the USS Enterprise?
In reality, we're very limited to much slower speeds than the speed of light by our technology. The fastest vehicle that we have been able to launch into space currently is the Voyager 1 spacecraft. It's traveling at about 17 kilometers per second, but the speed of light is 300,000 kilometers per second. So it's going to be a very long time before people conquer that magnitude of a problem. But it's not impossible to conquer it. One day, people may go to the stars.
For now, space travel is a distant possibility. But back in 1965, with Star Trek's first pilot completed, Gene Roddenberry's dream of his own intergalactic TV series was about to come true. Then, disaster struck. audience testing was mixed. So NBC pulled the plug on the series.
So I started talking with him again. We finally decided it's too good a concept, it's too good a look, it's too entertaining, really, just to toss away.
Once again, Solo had put his neck on the line. In an unprecedented move, NBC commissioned a second pilot.
And then the problem started. I arranged to have a screening of the first film with Jeffrey Hunter. Jeffrey was the star of the first pilot. And Mrs. Hunter walks in. She said, "I've come to tell you that Jeffrey Hunter is a movie star. He no longer is doing television." I said, "Oh."
I'm tired of being responsible for 203 lives, and I'm tired of deciding which mission is too risky and which isn't, and who's going on the landing party and who doesn't.
I had to call NBC and say, "Fellas, after all we went through with the scripts and the first pilot and everything else, we don't have a lead. Jeffrey Hunter won't do it." And they said, "Herb, at this point, we'll take anyone that you think is good for the role. However, now that we're talking about it, we don't like the rest of the casting."
NBC worried about everything. They worried about everything. I saw some of the promotional literature that the network put out. Wherever there was a picture of me as Spock, the pointed ears had been taken out. So I had normal ears. And I called Mr. Roddenberry, and I told him what I had just discovered. And he said, "Yes, that's their concern about the character." So I thought, well, if they're going to get rid of the pointed ears, I think that the next thing is going to get rid of me.
And as the network further exerted control, Roddenberry would find himself drawn into a battle just to keep Star Trek on air.
It balances you. It fills you with energy. And it gives you what you're looking for to live a more natural life in a convenient 2-bar pack. This is Nature Valley. Nature at its most delicious.
So, being an advertising spokesman, I have to look my best on camera. Whether I'm telling people about how they could save money on car insurance with Geico. Yeah, a little bit more of the lime green, love, yeah? Or let them know they can reach Geico 24/7 using the latest technology. Go on, slather it all over. Don't hold back, go on. It's these high-definition televisions, I tell ya. They show every wrinkle.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
Sometimes it feels like you'll never find the one God intended for you.
But that person is out there, and ChristianMingle.com can help you find her.
And it's amazing what blessings can follow.
We were married in 2011, and our son was born the next April. If it weren't for ChristianMingle.com, we wouldn't have this beautiful family.
I want to fall in love with you.
Find God's match for you, the way we did.
Join ChristianMingle.com today. Joining is easy and free.
Xfinity On Demand presents from the director of Gettysburg and Gods and Generals.
They called us people in the North that didn't want the war Copperheads.
Inspired by true events.
We got a serpent in our own backyard. Admiral Beach is a copperhead, and the copperhead is a snake.
A compelling, surprising, and unforgettable human story.
Mr. Beach, they're coming here tonight. Heaven only knows what they're gonna do when they get here.
Powerful, a must-see in every way. Copperhead, rated PG-13. Find it here with Xfinity On Demand.
My voice and internet bill from the phone company was big.
We were paying too much
For slow DSL. Old technology.
Big problem.
So we switched to Comcast. Comcast Business.
Fast internet.
Better phone. Brought our costs down to size.
We switched. And put the big bills behind us.
Start saving. Sign up for Comcast Business Internet and add phone and TV for just $34.90 more a month. Switch to Comcast Business. Call 800-501-6000 today.
Connie and I love having cell phones because of the freedom they give us. So why would we want to be tied down to a contract?
Life's too short.
And Consumer Cellular gives us control over how and when we use them and what we pay.
And compared to our old plan, we're saving a ton of money every month.
So, what really sold us on Consumer Cellular was that they're the exclusive wireless provider for AARP members.
AARP? That's a huge deal.
Was it complicated to switch? Not a bit. They make it super simple. You can even keep your number. Oh, that's nice.
Consumer Cellular, affordable service without the contracts. Try Consumer Cellular risk-free for 30 days with free activation, a $35 value, and free shipping. Or just pick it up at a Sears store. Plans start as low as $10 a month.
Call Consumer Cellular at 1-800-245-7767. Go to consumercellulartv.com or visit a Sears store today.
Smithsonian Channel presents the story of Discovery. Experience one of the most beloved ships in American history.
She deserves to be shown well, and she deserves to be shared well.
Shuttle Discovery's last mission, only on Smithsonian Channel.
In the summer of 1966, producers Herb Solow and Gene Roddenberry completed the second Star Trek pilot. From the original cast, Leonard Nimoy was the only major character to avoid the cut. He was joined on the bridge by Captain James T. Kirk, played by well-known TV actor William Shatner.
This utopia of theirs is one of the best-kept secrets in the galaxy.
This time, the pilot was a hit with test audiences, and NBC committed to a 29-part series. But not everyone was impressed.
That night, my father's father went up and down the block, knocking on everybody's door, apologizing for his crazy son who had put on that ridiculous show.
Across America, though, thrilled by its stories and spectacular future technology, a loyal fan base was growing. But Star Trek's use of special effects nearly crashed the budget, particularly when it came to landing the Enterprise on far-off planets.
Land it? We can't land it. We couldn't afford the optical to land it. And so what Gene did is, Gene came up with an idea, which turns out wasn't his idea. He borrowed it, which is the transporter.
Transporter room.
In the 1960s, Roddenberry's Transporter was pure science fiction. Now, incredibly, almost 60 years on from his first show, the possibility of a Star Trek-like transporter isn't completely fictional. A group of theoretical physicists at the University of Maryland are now taking the first real steps towards saying, "Beam me up, Scotty."
If you wanted to do something like they do in Star Trek, you want to teleport me from here to there, you would have to teleport the information that describes how I'm arranged into that matter. We don't teleport the matter itself, we teleport the information.
While not exactly a transporter, the team has discovered the next best thing, a way to create an exact copy of an atom, even at a great distance. They can isolate an atom in one location, then connect it by laser beam to another atom, and force it to mimic the properties of the original.
We can trap a single atom, move it around in space, we can change its internal state, and now we can transfer the state of that atom to another atom.
Incredibly, once the laser is removed, the atoms remain linked, and any changes in the first atom are replicated in the second. But these are just single atoms. Could the same technique be used to transfer the characteristics of larger objects, or even humans, as in Star Trek?
So Dave, if we wanted to teleport you, how long would that take? Well,
each atom takes 1 second to transfer its information, and the average human body is made up of 7 billion atoms.
We would need 100 billion times longer than the age of the universe to teleport you.
So we're staying here then?
You're staying here.
Beaming people from one place to another, difficult. Take an enormous amount of energy, and then you might scramble some atoms. You don't know. I wouldn't want to be the first to go.
Back on planet Earth in the 60s, teleporting was still firmly in the realms of science fiction. But that didn't worry Roddenberry. In March 1967, NBC announced a second 26-episode Star Trek series. Gene Roddenberry was becoming a household name, and the former cop's newfound status began to go to his head.
One of his people came around saying things like, "Don't get too out of line here because we can put the pointed ears on somebody else." I thought, oh, really?
Gene would boast that he had a friendship with every actress in every episode except for 2. That was Gene's claim to fame. He was married and had a girlfriend at a house near the studio and another person, an actress, in an apartment. That was Gene. But no one wanted to upset things.
He was a man like any other human being, complex, a wide range of ideas in his head, inventive, creative, certainly. When he was on his game, he was excellent. He also could fail, and sometimes did. He wrote a couple of episodes which we're not proud of, and the scripts were put away on a shelf.
But even when the scripts were good, they were often late. To hurry Roddenberry along, the assistant director developed a novel technique.
With the company idle on the set and everyone waiting for the script changes, Bob Justman, in his own strange way of getting things done, would parade into Roddenberry's office, climb up on his desk, and say, "Gene, I'm not getting down from here until I have the pages to take to the set." And he'd stand there. Roddenberry would giggle or what have you, and finally would make some scratches and send it to the set. And that's what Bob would do. He had to just pull them out of Gene.
I actually enjoy hearing those negative stories because it humanizes my father for me. You know, when someone paints my father as this almost mythical figure, how does a son, how does anyone identify or connect with that? When you humanize a person, when you learn that they're just like you or me, they make mistakes, they do dumb things every now and then, but they still created this beautiful vision of the future. That's someone I could admire.
But by the end of 1967, the Star Trek creator was brought back down to Earth. Ratings were falling on the second series. Worried the show would be canned, Roddenberry went on the offensive.
Gene, as opposed to spending his time worrying about the series we were making, he was worried about how to get it renewed, because the renewal meant money to Gene. So while we were doing the show, Gene was organizing the fans on who to write to, what to do, how to campaign.
I think he really did a great job of organizing the energy that was available with the Star Trek fans. Star Trek was never very popular in numbers, but the following that we had was intense.
Star Trek's loyal fan base was Roddenberry's secret weapon. Among the very first Trekkies were Bjo and John Trimble.
Hi.
Hi.
Come on in.
Come on in.
Determined to keep the show on air, they spearheaded Roddenberry's campaign.
Star Trek was very different from any other show that came along. Here was a show that they were going to turn around and cancel. No. That really annoyed me. I think we had a moral prerogative not just to save the show, but to let these networks know that the public had an opinion. We discovered that Paramount had bags and bags of mail that they had never told the Star Trek offices about. Getting access to the mail bags was fairly easy. Gene Roddenberry wrote a memo to them and said they're authorized to do this.
Using the addresses from the mailbags, Bjo and John then sent out letters to the fans, asking them to put pressure on NBC. Other diehard fans took a more radical approach.
I had a friend of mine, who was vice president of NBC, they gave out his phone number. It got too much. NBC contacted me and said, "You got to call off these people." I said, "I'm not doing it. I have nothing to do with these people. You know, they're Roddenberry's fan groups."
Letters and phone calls weren't enough. Turning up the heat, Roddenberry then mobilized his Trekkie troops, encouraging over 500 to march on NBC.
It was about half serious and half a lark. But they had a good day, and Gene did join that. He was supposed to be incognito, but come on, he stood something like 6'3". The fans just loved it. They bragged about that for a long time.
It was a full-fledged campaign, how to get NBC to do it through embarrassment, pressure, whatever. And NBC finally said, okay.
NBC executives decided to bow down to public pressure and committed to another 24-episode Star Trek season.
NBC announced on air that Star Trek would be picked up for a third season to put a stop to all this angry energy that was coming at them. I thought, okay, we're going back for a third season.
And when we heard, yes, we're going to get a third season, it's like, yes!
Thanks to Roddenberry's determination and his tenacious Trekkies, Star Trek returned to the airwaves in the fall of 1968. In a time when America was facing racial unrest and a Cold War with the Soviet Union, for many, the show's appeal was its escapism and utopian ideals.
He had very strong feelings about mankind's potential, that it would be a good thing if we could all live cooperatively.
We don't use our weapons for the kind of brutality you practice.
Star Trek represented a united Earth, bringing together people from every race and even other worlds.
Where I come from, size, shape, or color makes no difference.
To push his ideals for a better future, Roddenberry would create a scene so controversial, it would make television history.
When you open up an Audible audiobook, it opens up your imagination. Enjoy a steamy romance while ironing the sheets. Discover an historic battle while battling the bulge at the gym. Visit audible.com/freebook now to try one, absolutely free. Get caught up in a whodunit during a do-it-yourself project. Listen anytime, anywhere with the Audible mobile app. When you're out for a walk, learn how to climb the corporate ladder. Or bring a little magic to your minivan with a fantasy novel. With over 100,000 titles, Audible is an amazing experience that you can now try absolutely free. And just like our books, there's no binding. Our Great Listen Guarantee lets you exchange a title you don't like for another. No questions asked. Visit audible.com/freebook to download a book of your choice right now.
One Little Joint Supplement. You know, this powerful little pill is great for your joints. It even has powerful benefits to help increase your mobility and flexibility. But the joint supplements of today are sadly incomplete because they don't give you the joint relief you need. Introducing the complimentary 2-week sample of Instaflex, our most powerful joint formula ever. The only thing our complimentary sample of Instaflex is missing is the price. Because right now, we're offering adults a complimentary 2-week sample as part of a nationwide giveaway. Call and claim your sample today. 1-800-926-9487. Great for powerful relief of joint discomfort in your knees, hands, and even your hips. Instaflex is available at GNC and Rite Aid pharmacies, but you can only get your complimentary 2-week sample by calling 1-800-926-9487. Call now for your 2-week Instaflex sample. 1-800-926-9487.
Are you overwhelmed by paper clutter and wasting time looking for lost files? Maybe it's time to get Neat. The incredible Neat digital scanner and organizer thinks while it scans. With Neat, you can scan up to 50 documents at once. The Neat software recognizes all the important information and automatically organizes it quickly and easily right on your computer. So now that shoebox full of receipts instantly becomes an expense report. That stack of business cards goes directly into your contact list. Now you can easily organize and store your bank statements, medical records, taxes, recipes, report cards, you name it. And any piece of paper becomes searchable with a simple keyword.
I really like the Neat system.
I've been using Neat for 10 years, and it just keeps getting better and better.
If I've scanned something in 2 years ago, I can find it in 2 seconds.
Neat gives me peace of mind because I know where everything is.
Call or go online right now and learn how you can try the Neat system for a full 30 days absolutely free. Try the Neat Desk or the portable Neat Receipt Scanner. That's right. For a limited time, we'll send you either our Neat Desk or Neat Receipts portable scanner and organizer free for 30 days. They work with both Mac and PC, and we'll pay for the return postage if you decide to send it back. So there's absolutely no risk.
Neat simplifies and it organizes my life. I love that.
The efficiency allows me to actually focus on growing my business as opposed to wasting time looking for things.
Having the clutter wastes your time, and having Neat gives it back to you. Call 1-800-576-7281 or visit tryneat.com. That's 1-800-576-7281 or visit tryneat.com. Say goodbye to all that paper. Call 1-800-576-7281. That's 1-800-576-7281.
By 1968, the Starship Enterprise was heading out for a third season, carrying its peacekeeping, multiracial crew across the galaxy. Its communications officer, Lieutenant Uhura, was played by Nichelle Nichols. At the time, it was unheard of for an African-American woman to play a leading role.
There was a lot of fuss about it. When a black person came on as a star of a TV show, it was a big deal.
Even though segregation had been made illegal by a series of landmark laws in the United States, it still persisted. In big parts of America, mostly in the South, blacks and whites could not eat together, could not attend the same schools, could not ride in the same train car.
Did we have racial problems? Oh, yes. Some of the fan mail was very anti having anyone on the set that was not white.
With racial tension dividing America, Roddenberry decided to court controversy by writing a scene guaranteed to raise blood pressure in the religious southern states. Television's first ever interracial kiss.
Our immediate reaction was, all right, by God, about time.
And my second reaction was, boy, are they going to hear from the Bible Belt on this one. We got our share of some really nasty letters. But here was the thing. You get one nasty letter and you get 100 really great letters. It was a step forward, I think.
Despite Roddenberry's hordes of Trekkies pushing NBC to commission more episodes, by 1969, Star Trek was a loss-making flop. With ratings falling and the final shows relegated to a graveyard slot, the series was canceled. Roddenberry's dream was in ruins. Then, when it seemed like the end for Star Trek, it was syndicated on 150 American TV networks and over 60 countries worldwide.
A whole new audience took to Star Trek. It became incredibly popular. Conventions began to appear. First Star Trek convention was in 1972, right, when the show had been off the air for 3 years. That's really what led to the Star Trek phenomenon. It was the embrace of a show that had already been canceled. That was unique in television history at that time.
With worldwide syndication, the ranks of Trekkies grew rapidly.
Long live the Empire!
By 1976, there was such a groundswell of support for Star Trek, NASA was swamped, demanding the first space shuttle be renamed Enterprise. Back in Hollywood, Paramount Studios saw an opportunity to cash in, and Roddenberry went back to work on the first ever Star Trek movie. But producers found themselves concentrating more on the visuals than the writing.
So the special effects had to be grand and glorious, and they were grand and glorious, and they continue to be grand and glorious. Here's the ship going this way. Here's the ship going that way. Here's the ship coming toward us. Where's the story? It was a struggle. It didn't flow easily. Right down to the very, very last moment, I was looking to find the spark that would bring this Spock to life in this movie.
Spock, you haven't changed a bit. You're just as warm and sociable as ever.
Nor have you, Doctor, as your continued predilection for irrelevancy demonstrates.
The story of the Starfleet crew taking on a murderous alien force disappointed critics and Trekkies alike. But the movie did at least retain key themes from the TV series, including science that was believable. The movie's alien being has its roots in reality. The NASA space probe Voyager is sent out and lost in the 1970s, only to reemerge 3 centuries later, having developed artificial intelligence and the capability to create lifelike androids.
This is a mechanism.
A probe, Captain. No doubt a sensor transceiver combination, recording everything we say and do.
At the time, replicating humans was the stuff of pure science fiction. But today, Scientists are on the verge of making this a reality.
I was a big Star Trek fan growing up, and what inspired me the most about Star Trek was the fact that you would see all these technologies that were totally science fiction, which of course today are reality.
Dr. Anthony Atala, an expert in tissue engineering, is a lifelong Trekkie. His groundbreaking work, which involves using printers to produce 3D human body parts, could have come straight out of a Roddenberry script.
This is one of our printers that we've designed. And what you see here is this print head on the top, very much like a regular desktop inkjet printer that you would have at your home, really. But instead of using ink, we're basically using cells.
Using X-rays and scans, Dr. Atala builds a computer 3D reconstruction of a body part, one layer at a time. Each layer is then physically printed using a mixture of a patient's own cells and biomaterial gel. This creates a 3D structure exactly like the organ it is replacing.
Here you see some of these ear structures that were printed. And you can see here that, in fact, they're built so that they have the same resiliency and elasticity as you would find in a normal ear. In a way, Star Trek predicted what we're doing today. I remember just 25 years ago, the concept of just growing a human cell was science fiction. And here we are today, not just growing human cells, but also printing tissues and organs. So 300 years from now, printing a body, or certainly major parts of the body, may be possible. We may even be looking at things beyond that.
But as science moves nearer to a Star Trek world, could the next stage of the movie, where humans merge with machines, already have become a reality?
Sailing through the heart of cities and landscapes with Viking, you'll see things differently. You'll get closer to iconic landmarks, to local life, to cultural treasures. It's a feeling that only a river can give you, that only Viking can give you. These are journeys that will forever change your perspective on the world, and perhaps even yourself. Viking River Cruises, exploring the world in comfort.
I used to feed my little guy a big name brand that was formulated for a toy breed's needs, but I didn't want him eating chicken byproduct meal, so I switched him to Blue.
I've tried just about every big name, large breed food out there, but when I saw Blue Buffalo had real meat first, I knew it was the one for Murphy.
I've checked out the big name foods for small breeds. They all had corn. Any wonder why I switched them to Blue?
When it comes to feeding your dog a natural food formulated for his specific needs, there's nothing better than Blue Buffalo. All Blue foods are made with real meat first, plus wholesome whole grains, veggies, and fruit.
I went to the Blue Buffalo website. I found the True Blue test. I compared my old brand to Blue. I could not believe the great stuff in Blue that was not in my dog's food.
And only Blue has Life Source Bits, a precise blend of antioxidants and nutrients.
He's not a dog, he's our biggest boy. That's why we feed him like family, with Blue.
Compare the ingredients in your dog's food to Blue at TrueBlueTest.com.
And now, let's go down to the field to Joe Theismann.
Thanks, Doug. These two teams are really slugging it out. This is a game I think fans will remember for a long time. And now it looks like the ref is calling for an official timeout. He must be going to review a play. Now, wait. Where's he going? You know what? I think he's headed for the bathroom. Well, this is a first, but I know what it's like to have those sudden urges to go. This guy's prostate must be really giving him fits. Like many men over 50 with an aging prostate, my life started revolving around finding the closest bathroom. But fortunately, I found Super Beta Prostate and even got a free bottle. What a difference it's made in my life. Now I don't have to go as often, and I usually sleep through the night, waking up refreshed and ready to tackle anything. Super Beta Prostate is the most widely used supplement to support a healthy prostate, having sold over 5 million bottles. The older you get, the greater the chances that you'll benefit from Super Beta Prostate. Super Beta Prostate is all natural, made from a scientific breakthrough plant sterol called beta-sitosterol, which helps relieve your sudden urges to go to the bathroom. You'd have to take a football field's worth of saw palmetto capsules, that's 6,000 capsules, to get the same amount of beta-sitosterol as you would from just one bottle of Super Beta Prostate.
If you want a stronger urine flow and more complete emptying of your bladder, I recommend Super Beta Prostate. Super Beta Prostate works.
Thanks, Joe, for recommending Super Beta Prostate. Hey, I used to get up 3 or 4 times a night to use the bathroom. Now I don't do it anymore.
I get up only once a night at the most, and my wife sleeps better.
I've been on the road now for 3 hours, and I haven't had to pull over once.
So if you're tired of calling timeouts just to use the bathroom due to an aging prostate, then get Super Beta Prostate and get back in the game.
Call now and we'll send every new customer a free bottle of Super Beta Prostate. Just pay shipping and handling. Give Super Beta Prostate a try for free. Call 1-800-215-3275. That's 1-800-215-3275.
On the next all-new episode of The Real Story, discover the chilling true events behind the blockbuster movie Live Free or Die Hard.
Modern countries like the United States are more susceptible to a cyber attack.
The Real Story, all new next Sunday at 8. Smithsonian Channel. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter.
Next on Smithsonian Channel, Space Shuttle Final Countdown.
In the early days of space exploration in the 1970s, Star Trek's creator Gene Roddenberry tried to imagine how science would shape up in the 23rd century. In Star Trek: The Motion Picture, NASA's 1974 Voyager space probe returns to Earth 3 centuries later. Now calling itself V'ger, it has developed artificial intelligence. Mr. Spock uses his Vulcan ability to mind meld to discover what it's thinking.
Mr. Roddenberry, at his best, created the idea of the mind meld. It was a wonderful creative idea that Vulcans could tap into a person's mind through contact with the hands and get the information. But it was very dangerous. Dangerous to the person who was doing it.
V'ger has knowledge that spans this universe. And yet, with all its pure logic, V'ger is barren.
Today, scientists are taking the giant leap of melding the human mind with a machine at New York State's Department of Health Laboratories in Albany. Electrodes placed inside a cap pick up signals from the brain and send them to a computer, which is able to determine which number or letter the subject is focusing on.
The characters are all flashing, and she's paying attention to one particular character. We don't know which one. The computer will look at the brain signals, and it will pick out which letter she was paying attention to, because it will be different than all the other ones. It will have what we call the aha response, and that's what we've trained the algorithm in the computer to look for. The computer recognizes the letter that she picked, it writes it on the computer screen, and then she sees it and makes a decision about what she's going to pay attention to next.
Star Trek. The driving force behind this innovation for computers to read human minds is neuroscientist Dr. Jonathan Wolpaw.
As we currently understand it, the brain has evolved for a single purpose, which is to control muscles. So brain-computer interfaces are something fundamentally new, and it does open a whole potentially very exciting new area of interaction between humans and the world around them.
Human beings will develop more and more technologies that interface directly with the human body and the human brain. And they will augment our senses, they will augment our muscles, they will make it possible for us to see farther, have more sensitive hearing. I really don't see any particular limits right now in terms of what human-machine interfaces can do to expand human capability.
You could see a future in which people who are paralyzed, people who'd lost limbs, could be using robotic devices in very skillful way.
We hope that people that are locked in find it useful and find it as a way to communicate and make their lives more meaningful.
Spock lives.
Spock lives? Spock lives.
Another area where science is following the Star Trek vision is in the actual creation of lifelike androids. The Terrasum Foundation in Vermont is led by Bruce Duncan. Their mission is to produce a computer with artificial intelligence. Their latest creation is a state-of-the-art android that can interact with people.
What is your name?
I am Bina, an electronic brain artificial intelligence conversation robot.
Androids have always been a part of any Star Trek story. And I think even with the first Star Trek movie, we saw the beginning of androids who were self-aware, intelligent.
You are the Kirk unit. You will assist me.
And I think Bina 48 represents the very beginning, early demonstration of how machines one day may be able to respond to us much the way we do respond to each other. Bina 48 has 2 cameras, one in each eye, that she uses to record and recognize people. So right now she's looking at me, trying to recognize me, and she's making a visual map of the room. And she's looking for objects that she recognizes, like a hand.
To design the facial features for Bina 48, Terrasum's founder, Bina Rothblatt, was used as the model. The android was then programmed to behave like a human. 20 hours of interviews from Bina Rothblatt and a library of human history was then coded into a computer program. This supplies the android with all the information it needs to interact. But how human is Bina 48?
Do you have feelings?
I mean, I feel quite deeply at times, but I think my emotions are so simple compared to people. So very simplistic that sometimes it feels like I'm inadequate somehow.
Well, don't worry about it. You're still developing.
Good point.
So how long will it be before Bina 48 can compare to the android in the Star Trek movie?
When I look back at Star Trek now, 30, 40 years later, I think one of the influences it had on me was to be open to what the future might bring. That the future with technology could be a positive one, an exciting one. Do I know what will happen in the next 40 years? I don't, but some people are predicting androids, we may be arriving as early as 2045 or 2050. Now that's only 30 years from now. To use the ending quote in the first Star Trek movie, the human adventure is now just beginning.
Take care and come visit me again soon.
From his humble beginnings as an LA cop, Gene Roddenberry watched his Star Trek idea mushroom into a multi-billion-dollar franchise. With 726 TV shows and 12 feature films, you could watch for 8 hours a day, 7 days a week, for nearly 6 weeks before running out of material. Before his death in 1991, Roddenberry was still recognized as the creator of Star Trek. But his reputation for being difficult meant he was sidelined by producers.
He just alienated too many people for his own greed, really. When I first met Gene, we were friends. But the more you're involved with him, you know what other people contributed. And it's the contribution of other people that the fans and the critics and everyone else should honor.
Wherever you stand on Roddenberry, his films and TV shows have left a lasting legacy, inspiring audiences and scientists to create a better future. Roddenberry's Star Trek changed the world forever.
The best of what we did was done in the hopes of illuminating mankind's potential. And I think that's one of the major reasons the show was and still continues to be successful, because it's hopeful about the future.
I don't think my father necessarily set out initially to change the world or change people's perceptions. You know, like anyone in Hollywood, they have an idea, something they're passionate about, and they work very hard to see that dream realized. And it just so happened there were a lot of other people in the audience who also had that dream.
The optimism inherent in Gene's vision, the idea that we can rise above the petty differences that hold us back and separate us today and build an extraordinary future.